Hey guys, welcome back to World of Warships. Today we're taking a look at the Agir. Continuing on with these coal ships versus 2024, I want to see what some of these coal ships are like in the current year so I can update some of my recommendations for you guys. Today with the Agir Tier 9 German battle cruiser, it doesn't get a citadel on the broadside of Tago. Oh no. We have another opportunity. If you know me, you know I'm not a huge fan of battle cruisers, but maybe Agir can change that for me. Broadside of Tago again, and yet this one goes low, even though he turns in. Possible aiming bug there, I think. Not entirely sure, but that's maybe the biggest issue with battle cruisers right here. They give up cruiser level dispersion to gain these large guns. And, well, it's a little frustrating, I'm not gonna lie. It's a little bit frustrating, and in exchange for that, unfortunately, we don't actually have much utility either on the Agir specifically. No radar or anything like that, and we're somewhat tanky, but we're really hoping for that to happen, right? So we want those dev strikes, we want at least some citadels when a cruiser goes broadside at medium to close range. And Agir is maybe not quite consistent enough at that for me personally. I can understand, though, why you would enjoy this ship. The armor is pretty good, especially at closer ranges. We're actually going to survive quite a while against this Preußen. I'm really not in a good position here, but it will show you off some of the armor. Preußen's got a lot of overmatch, and at closer ranges, the accuracy is decent enough to hit us, especially because Agir is such a large ship. But it's this upper belt that is so thick that allows us to shatter HE as well as auto-bounce battleship shells. It's very good. The guns here on the Agir are 305s that have pretty solid AP alpha damage, but the HE, much like many German ships, is a little anemic, so oftentimes you're going to want to just shoot the armor piercing. I found myself oftentimes even against angled ships just shooting AP because the HE salvos are just that disappointing. I have a few clips later on where we're going to look at shots into destroyers as well. And even there, the AP seems to do more damage with its overpens rather than HE full pens. It's a little bit sad. The fire chance, though, is rather decent, so if you're able to spam a lot of HE consistently on a target, you will get fires, which is nice to have. Although with our longer reload of 20 seconds, it does mean that HE spamming is really not recommended with this ship. I think the 18.5 kilometers of range is good enough for a tier 9, although unfortunately for tier 9s these days, they get pulled up into tier 10 and super ship games quite a bit. So you're going to find yourself lacking in some range here. We don't have a spotter plane either to extend that, so we're really relying on our concealment. So I really don't know about having a lighthouse style build on this ship. I found this ship to be hard enough for me to play with a more standard build, using my concealment, trying to flank, trying to get into opportunistic positions using our concealment, and then shooting some AP into people's broadsides. I found that difficult enough without being spotted from the moon as well. So I think Agir is decent, but I really do think this ship just lacks some of the consistency out of the main guns. Some of these salvos into a broadside Preußen are pretty sad, given that it's battlecruiser dispersion with 2.05 Sigma. I would like to just be a little more consistent, and that's just a really common issue that I have with battlecruisers, and that's possibly just something that I get wrong about this game. I know a lot of people do enjoy the Agir, and I think this ship is very, very good in things outside of random battles. If you find yourself in tier 9 ranked or any sort of brawl, this ship has the tools to allow it to push in as a cruiser and do some really good damage. And again, if these guns hit, the damage is great. Like, if it was just a little bit more consistent in that accuracy against cruisers, I think I'd have a really good time with these ships, because that consistent AP alpha into broadsides with not very good HE is oftentimes what I'm looking for with ships, where it's not just about HE spam, it's about finding broadsides and punishing them. And it's just not quite consistent enough for me. And I think that, again, I'm going to say that a lot, but you're going to hear that all the time when I'm talking about battle cruisers. It's my one complaint about them. Hydro here is excellent, though. We do have a 6 kilometer hydro, and of course, we do have the armor to push in. With this hydro, we can dodge a lot of torpedoes. Even though the maneuverability is not great, our rudder shift is very, very, very slow. We should be able to dodge a reasonable amount of incoming torps. since this is a Venom here. And there are opportunities like this in a lot of matches, especially when there's no sub or carrier, that you can push up on the flanks using island cover, things like that. And getting close to these destroyer engagements will allow you to help your team out a lot. 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 damage into that Venom there because we hit 6 HE shells. Although keep in mind it is arms race. We already have an alpha damage buff, so you won't see that in most of your matches. But when these shells hit, it's very, very nice. So we do manage to take this Venom out, or help take this Venom out rather quickly. So in ranked battles, if you're able to push early and assist in those destroyer engagements from up close, using your tankiness and a large HP pool, you will win a lot of games that way. And I think random battles is just really difficult to do that. So it is a ship that will shine much more in those smaller game modes with less players on the battle, and that allow you to push in, allow you to flank a lot easier. Also, look at those bounces. That feels pretty good. That feels pretty good to have a cruiser that can do that very reliably. And it's not just because Kearsarge has 406s. Any size guns would bounce there, right? They have to aim for our nose or stern specifically to overmatch it. So I'll show you that in port later. The armor here is good when they don't know where to aim. It's very good if they don't know where to aim, but as soon as someone knows where to aim, suddenly this ship takes a ton of damage. Pushing in here, I'm waiting for that next salvo to go more broadside to get my Torps away. But our Fantask here does get the Torps first, so we don't actually get really much damage into this Kearsarge, but this Fantask allowed us to push in very aggressively and help that flank go so well for us. 122 even in such a blowout, which feels pretty good. The ship wants to be at closer ranges, and unfortunately, that's just kind of how random battles don't play out most of the time. Moving on though, here's a great example of fighting DDs at close ranges. We do manage to push up here because the enemy team kind of just left this flank, so using island cover and then waiting to see what's around. Speaking of secondaries, really not worth speccing into, unfortunately. The test ship version of Agir was excellent for secondaries. It no longer is. And we just miss entirely at 4 kilometers. I think I aimed a little bit too far forward, but still. Somehow we missed entirely there, which feels awful. I think some of those probably should have hit. So we'll aim a little better this time and only get 2 hits. It wouldn't even take much to finish him off here. And now we're stuck in an unenviable situation of being broadside to one of these 2 destroyers here. There's a Fletcher and this Lightning. So if this Lightning dies any earlier, well, I can very easily angle into the Fletcher Torps and not take as much damage. But as it stands, I gotta angle to both, and we're gonna eat, what, 3 Fletcher Torps? Oof. Feels bad, man. A little better RNG, and again, for that first one, I could have aimed slightly better, but going through it very slowly, some of those shells actually phased through his ship. So maybe there was some desync, I don't know. But a little bit annoying, And then just to rub some salt in the wound, I guess, or show us that, yes, Agir is actually able to be accurate. We get 7 out of 9 on the Fletcher. When it doesn't really matter. That's the thing, man. There's bright spots. There's such massive bright spots of, wow, this thing hits so hard. The shells are amazing. They all hit. And then it becomes a battleship. One of the worst battleships, dispersion-wise. So I just can't rely on it, and that, I think, frustrates me a little bit, where I can't rely on the shells to consistently do damage. And if I'm playing a ship like Agir where we want to be pushing in, oftentimes when you push in, you need your guns to do consistent damage. Plays like that are a great example against those 2 DDs, where if I get any more damage into that Lightning, I don't take all those Torps. I maybe take 1 Torp if I turn into the Fletcher, because I don't have to worry about those Torps from that Lightning. There's a lot of plays like that where you push in and you need your guns to get damage, and then when they don't, it's very frustrating. And that leads to more passive games, I think, too, because if I can't trust my guns to make a play, or I need the guns to work properly in order for a play to be successful, a push to be successful, then I'm just not going to take that risk. I'm not going to make that push, and then the games get more passive because everybody starts playing further back. And that's too bad. So I do think with more consistent output, I would be able to play much more aggressively. Speaking of, let's move on. NC here, we do have a bit of his side at this angle. Well, he's low enough that we should finish him off anyway. So, and we do. Takahashi here, broadside onto us. So we're going to use our mini map here to aim, try and aim vertically and land those shells right into his broadside. That's kind of the key here about behind islands. Again, no spotter plane. And hopefully we'll get some hits, although the dispersion doesn't look too great. Overpans only. All right, now we can see him. Now it's much easier. Back turret, best turret, right? Well, no, not this time. Maybe we'll get another opportunity. Managed to dodge the sub ping there, and our AA really is not that special, honestly. I wouldn't really rely on it for anything, but I think you already probably knew that when it comes to any surface ship in the entire game. He's still broadside. He's still broadside, guys. He did not learn his lesson. Maybe there was no lesson to be learned, in fact. Surely. Surely. No. 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 We're playing a battle cruiser, guys. We're playing a battle cruiser. If you thought that was going to Citadel, well, you haven't seen my battle cruisers, I guess. I don't know. This is the issue. I don't want to be too overly negative because I know a lot of people love the Agir and other battle cruisers. Keep in mind, this is just my opinion on the ship and my experience with the ship. If you're having a great time with the ship, I don't want some random YouTube guy to prevent you from having fun. Oh, and then we get the Citadel at longer range when he's more angled. It's just the way the World of Warships game works. It's not very consistent. Feels like dice rolls. And I think the best way I can describe this to you is that for me, this class, this battle cruiser class, feels like I'm giving up the consistency of cruisers, which is their strength, their consistent damage output, their consistent battle impact, and giving that up for battleship randomness, but not gaining the massive upside of battleship randomness that is massively hard-hitting guns, right? These guns hit reasonably hard, but they're not battleship caliber. They don't really do dev strikes to things. You're not citadeling battleships at longer ranges. It's really only against cruisers, and even then, as you can see from this video, it's rather inconsistent. So I don't feel like I'm gaining that upside. The other upside of battleships I'm not really gaining is tankiness. Sure, when they hit our upper belt, it's gonna bounce, it's gonna shatter, assuming we're angled. But as soon as they hit our deck armor, which at longer ranges is much more likely, and any of the bow or stern, it's just going to be overmatched and we're going to take tons of damage. So I don't really feel like this ship is all that tanky either. And on top of that, we don't have any of the cruiser battle impact tools, like a radar, for example. Alaska is not a fair comparison because that ship is mostly unavailable outside of Black Friday and is a different type of currency as well, doubloons or just real money. But Agir is not a great pick. It's not a great pick for me, but I think for some of you, it can be fun. The torpedoes can be enjoyable. But I think a lot of the time you're not going to get opportunities to play it at those closer ranges in random battles. And I think maybe that's kind of the issue here with some of these coal ships and just premium ships in general, is if I'm ranking them based on random battles, which is oftentimes what I'm going to do because that's what most people play, then some of these close range brawling ships get a little bit underrated perhaps by me because they don't perform so well in random battles. Napoli's a bit of an exception because that ship is just so busted that it can walk over anybody. But most ships are not Napoli, right? And I don't want most ships to be Napoli. That's a little bit too tanky, let's say. But it's just a little disappointing to play something like an Agir for me, just because I'm hoping the guns are going to do better than they actually are. If you get yourself in a position like this in random battles, it can succeed, right? People are just walking broadside to us. We're behind cover, so we don't have to worry about people firing at us. So we can be a little more broadside. Something I haven't mentioned, but the gun angles are not all that impressive. So we do have to give up a little bit of broadside to actually fire our rear turrets. Nice salvo there into the Shikushima, of course. And yeah, I didn't really mention, I briefly touched on secondaries, but they used to be insane in testing. This was kind of the secondary German battle cruiser idea, and then they changed it for whatever reason after in testing, so it didn't come out with those secondaries. And then we got things like Napoli and Admiral Schroder for that was Dockyard, and those got the secondary buffs, where Agir just kind of sits here with underwhelming 305s, I guess. A little unfortunate for the Agir. Sure, the range is decent, but it's just the accuracy is so poor on the secondaries, and as a cruiser, you don't have any ways to buff that with manual secondaries like a battleship might. If cruisers got some battleship skills, Agir could be excellent as a secondary ship. If it could take manual secondaries, if it could take like some of the brawler builds, or fire prevention would help this thing out quite a bit, as well as many battle cruisers would like fire prevention. But as it stands, it doesn't get those skills. So we take, I guess, top grade gunner, give us a little bit of extra reload once people are spotted within our concealment range. But other than that, it's a very standard build here on the Agir, at least for random battles. Do manage to take out the Minnesota, and the damage is stacking up here. We've farmed quite a bit of damage from this position. It's a very good ship against broadsides for the most part, and the damage has been relatively consistent here, as long as we're not aiming at cruisers, light cruisers for citadels. That's the problem. If we're aiming for battleships and going for upper belt pens, superstructure pens at medium and long ranges, it can look reasonably consistent. But as soon as it's any of those smaller light cruisers where we have to be a little more pinpoint accurate, that's where it just kind of breaks down and feels a bit more like dice rolls to me. Again, I want to stress this. This ship can be fun. If you're having a good time with it, just ignore what I'm saying and continue to have a good time with it. It is a video game after all, and if you're having fun, that is all that matters. But for those of you looking into this ship, if you should be getting it, well, now you know my opinion. Make sure you check out other people's opinions as well. That's the best way to get a holistic look at a ship. Not just take one person's word for it, but look at a bunch of different reviews on something and then make up your mind. Although I gotta say, this camo certainly does look very, very nice on this ship. It's a little bit of an extra thing. You gotta get some doubloons for it, but it looks pretty good. The standard camo is not bad as well, but these special ones are kind of nice. The build here looks like this. This is what I was running, trying to maximize our guns here a little bit. Heavy AP giving us that higher alpha damage. Nearly 10,000 alpha damage on these guns with a 17.6 second reload. Should be good, right? And it is when they hit. I gotta add that qualifier most of the time, unfortunately. Concealment, of course, helping us get 11.9 and decent speed as well. It's just that this turning circle radius and rudder shift time are not good. You'll see I'm actually running prop mod right now and it's still 11.2. That helped a little bit, but then we give up propulsion. So to gain the rudder shift mod, we give up propulsion, and that's a little sad. Outnumbered here can be a good skill to have, just not in randoms. It's really hard to proc in random battles. If you're playing a Brawl with less ships in the game, a ranked game mode, I think Outnumbered could be really good on this ship. The extra speed and the extra accuracy you gain here would be excellent. And if you can play on your own flank in one of those game modes, you're just going to have it activated all the time. And that would help this ship out a ton. 10% dispersion is a lot. And this ship could be very good with that. Upgrades wise looks like this. Of course, going aiming systems, nothing else. And I was running steering gears and propulsion. I kind of flipped back and forth. I would run steering gears and then I'd feel bad about to not have propulsion mod because it would just be so slow to accelerate, maneuvering around islands, anything like that. But then as soon as I went with propulsion mod, we just had such a slow rudder shift that I didn't feel very maneuverable at all. It felt like a battleship. And that's not great when your armor looks like this, especially at range, right? Keep in mind, shells are impacting like this. Your very excellent upper belt here does not come into play at longer ranges, which is oftentimes where we're playing in random battles. So you have a 30 mil deck armor, which is pretty big, and then 27 mil bow with no icebreaker. This is the problem. At range, you're going to get overmatched by a lot of ships at high tier. There's a lot of 30 mil overmatch at higher tier. And as we've said, a lot of tier 9s get pulled up into tier 10 and super ship games these days. And then at your bow being 27 mil, well, that's where you got to aim. At closer ranges, right? You try and bait people into hitting here for sure. But most people are going to try and hit you here if they know about this ship. You want to hit right here because behind this is your citadel. and it's actually a bit above water. There's a bit of turtle back here, which is nice. So, you know, going broadside at close range, that should help you out. But if you're trying to stay angled and try and play off this a little bit, if people know where to aim, they just aim right here, and they're just going to smash you and do a ton of citadel damage to you. And even at longer ranges, this is a really large nose. So if you can aim for here, if you don't overmatch 30 mil, which most people do, but if you don't, you can aim for here and do tons of damage as well. So certainly some downsides here to the Agir armor scheme. We see that some other ships tend to get icebreakers, namely some of the Russian ones tend to get icebreakers, where Agir does not. So that's a little bit of a downside here as far as armor goes. But certainly a ship that can do well. It's not a ship that is outright bad all the time. It's just a ship that disappoints me with its dispersion. And because of that, I can't really recommend it if you're someone who also feels that when playing battleships or battle cruisers. But if you can play it in ranked game modes or brawls, closer range engagements that have less players, more opportunities to flank, it can perform very, very, very well. But that's going to do it for the Agir. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.